We are live. Hello and welcome everyone to part 2 of the health discussions with ADYE and on systemic racism. And we are going to first have the ADYE president and founder, Miss DonnaDickson, my beautiful sister. Go ahead, DonnaDickson.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. We would like to extend a warm welcome to our special guest, Chief Peter Sloly of the Ottawa Police Service, and Rawlson King. We'd also like to do a special thank you to Tim Tierney, he's Ottawa's councillor, and Matthew Fleury and Glenn Glover. And a very warm welcome to our dynamic panelists, Nick Reynolds, Talia Haywood, Keon Hughes, Kwazi Otu, Geoff Coventry. We're pleased to have this group of panelists who will be sharing their life's experience with racism and discrimination. Too often, these topics have either been avoided or downplayed. Many Blacks and other people of color have had to deal with racism and discrimination at one point or another in their lives, whether it was in school, at work, interaction with government officials, police, or strangers, and the list can go on. I also have many stories of how me and my family had to live through racism and discrimination as well. We have had many negative encounters with the school system, at work, and even with the police. It is not something you can easily forget or overcome. Not everyone has the strength to openly discuss the negative effects that racism and discrimination has had on their lives, and unfortunately, many suffer in silence. Tonight, I want to thank each and every one of you for sharing your stories with us, because I know it is not easy. That said, let's begin with our first panelist.
All right, so with our first panelist, I'm going to do a brief intro, and it is with my pleasure that I'm going to introduce now our first ever chief of police, our first ever Black chief of police for the Ottawa region. And Mr. Peter Sloly was sworn in as the chief of the Ottawa Police on October the 28th, 2019. And this is just my own personal opinion, but after reading your bio, I decided to say that you are definitely, Mr. Sloly, a gentleman and a scholar. Mr. Sloly is a husband, a father of 2 children. And when I read his bio, I was very impressed. He's got a Master of Business Administration. He's got his BA in Sociology. He's a sportsman. So from back in the 80s, played professional soccer. He was a member of the Canadian men's national soccer team, partner at Deloitte, where he was the national security and justice leader. And he was also a trusted and respected strategic advisor to private and public sector executives, helping them to increase organizational efficiency, as well as to improve public safety and service, trust, and value. He is a graduate of the FBI National Academy and served 2 tours of duty in the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Kosovo. And he's received many awards, including Officer of the Order of Merit of Police Forces Medal, the United Nations Peacekeeping Medal, the Canadian Peacekeeping Medal, the Police Exemplary Service Medal, and the Queen's Jubilee Medal are just a few of the awards and medals that our new Chief of Police has brought in. And I could continue to go on with his bio, but that's really, I think everything I've said is quite impressive. So with that, we're going to allow our police chief to speak to us. Just before he does, I just want to remind everyone that for this session, we're going to have rules, be professional and be considerate. No profanity, no racist slurs. We've sort of tweaked how we did the meeting this time around. So I've done the intro, but I kind of jumped into it a little too quickly. I should have done this piece before I introduced Chief of Police. And I know he understands all that I'm saying. He is definitely a man of honor. And I was quite impressed when I watched one of your you gave a little speech, or you had an interview, and your quote was exceptional. But we'll get into your quote later. So we're going to give you about 5 or 10 minutes to go ahead and speak, and we will be just trying to keep on track. So go ahead.
Thank you so much to the organizers for being patient. I know my schedule was tricky, and I'm grateful for people hanging in there and allowing me to be able to participate. My thanks to the host tonight, Donna. You continue to impress me with your resilience and your brilliance. People who have suffered what you have suffered would likely not be able to do this tonight and play a leadership role, and that's a credit to you and your family and your community. So I'm humbled and honored to be here, and I'll do my best to provide some value commensurate with the effort that everyone who's made to put this on will feel that their effort was worthwhile. The next thing I will say, although I really appreciate you reading out my bio and my CV, I think all of us who've put together a bio or CV know that it only tells a portion of your story. It tells the best part of it, and it tells the part that you want everybody to know about it, but it doesn't tell your whole story, and it doesn't tell all the times that you failed. It doesn't tell all the times you made mistakes. It doesn't tell all the embarrassing moments in your life. And what I will say, although I've learned a lot from my successes, I've learned more from my failures. And I'm still learning. I have attained in 54 years of life a measure of knowledge and a growing body of wisdom. But I'm learning something new every day as a father, as a police chief, as a leader, as a human being. And I suspect I'll continue to need to learn a lot because society is changing a lot. This year alone, society changed a lot, whether it was George Floyd or COVID, whether it was just the development of my own children and the stage of life that they're at. I'm so happy to see young people in some of the frames in the background there. That's both comforting and inspiring. So with that caveat, let me give you a little bit more of what wasn't in the CV. I was born in Kingston, Jamaica in 1966. It was a time of transition in the island's history. We had just got our independence. We were just learning to be independent. We were rebuilding and reimagining institutions, from government to healthcare to social services, and yes, to the justice system. To a degree, it was a time of renewal because we were able to unshackle ourselves from historical institutional practices and a Commonwealth approach to an independent approach. And we kept some of the old and we built in some of the new. And you know, it went well for just about 10 years. And then a lot of things changed in society, in the Caribbean, and in the country. And in a very short period of time, what had been a very hopeful decade turned around to be a very difficult decade. And many people from the islands left during that time. And my family immigrated to Canada in 1976. And I arrived here just shy of my 10th birthday, and had to sort of, with the family, and the same story that many immigrants have faced, you have to rebuild yourself financially, you have to rebuild yourself from a relationship standpoint, and you have to figure out where you fit in this new world. I don't want to claim any greater level of suffering or challenge than any other person on this call or any other person who's transitioned in that similar fashion. But we went from a very strong family network, financial stability, and understanding of who we were in Jamaica to a very destabilized position, and we had to find our way. And some of that was with great help from Canadian society, Canadian institutions, a country that was welcoming us to build Canada to be better. But some of it was very negative and some of it was very destructive. I will say, while I faced my own challenges of racism and trying to, make new friends and make my way, I was lucky as a human being. The good Lord blessed me with certain skills and abilities, and it allowed me to navigate systems better than others did. But within my own immediate family, my two brothers, I'm the middle of three children, and I saw both of my older brother and my younger brother struggle with systems that weren't designed for them, and couldn't really understand their needs. And while I was able to advance relatively well, they both struggled in their life, and even to this day are still trying to navigate very difficult institutional systems, social systems, and formal systems. I say that I still believe this is a great country. I believe it's the best country in the world. It is not without its faults currently, and it's certainly not without its faults historically. But its willingness to welcome me and my family here, to allow us to, with our own efforts and with the efforts of many other people, to not only survive but thrive. And despite many failures, many frustrations, and some very devastating events, we're still here. And the next generation of Slolys are here and doing their best to make a contribution while dealing with the struggles of today. I've had 3 different careers. They've all had a measure of success. They've all had a measure of challenge and failure. They've all built me into the person I am today. In each one of these, I've had a chance to represent Canada locally and internationally, and that's helped me to learn and to compare this country with other countries, this society with other society, the institution of policing here in Canada and the institution of policing in 4 other continents around the world. And so with that context, I say again, far from perfect and in need of much reform and change and advancement, we have the best model of policing in the world. It has served the country well over the course of the country's time, but it needs to be much, much better. And I think an honest conversation with any police officer and any police chief, I don't think you'd find too much of a difference of statement. I think we might find a lot of difference in terms of what exactly needs to change, how it needs to change, how fast it needs to change. And I know that there is a growing opinion that there shouldn't be any sort of a police right now. And I have to tell you, one of the fundamental principles of policing is to work our way out of a job. I think we'd all like to live in a world where there is no need for police and no crime and no violence and no other issues where we would need to have a police officer come. I'm pretty sure that won't happen in my lifetime, but that should be an aspiration that we all have, where there's no need for a hospital, there's no need for a prison, there's no need for a police station, that we are self-sufficient, resilient, good and healthy and safe, and we're self-actualizing and society actualizing. And that's a vision and a goal that we should all strive to, but we all need to keep our eyes on the prize, but our feet on the ground. And right now, the ground is not safe. It's not well. It's not healthy. It needs change, and it needs all of us to lean in and help to make the change. The last thing I will say, the issue of systemic racism is an issue in this society. As much as I love this country and this city, as much as I feel that I've made a contribution in the course of my working life, it has not properly addressed the issue of systemic racism or all the other systemic issues. Gender inequity, Indigenous issues, poverty, homelessness. These are all unaddressed issues that in a core portion of it requires systemic change. I will do everything I can in my time in office to address the issue of systemic racism within policing and within the Ottawa Police Service. I will do everything I can as a leader in this city to work with people like Councillor King, Councillor Tierney, Councillor Fleury, leaders like DonnaDickson in the community, to find ways to do this better and to do it together. But I don't have all the answers. And even if I did, I couldn't get it all done on my own. and I can't get it all done yesterday or even 100 days in the future. This is heavy work to change centuries of system building, institution building. It won't happen overnight. It can't happen with just one person. It will take everybody's efforts, inside institutions, outside of institutions. People of goodwill, willing to set aside differences and find some sort of common ground and common purpose and get things done together. That doesn't mean there won't be conflict. That absolutely doesn't mean there won't be mistakes made along the way. We'll have to agree to disagree on a lot of things, but we got to at least agree on some things. And then where we can find that agreement, let's make an effort and let's make the change we can. So I'll conclude my comments there, but I'd be happy to take any questions, and I'm looking forward to what other people share in terms of their own insight, their own journey. And again, I'm just honored to have the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to the discussion to follow.
Thank you very much, Chief Sloly. Right now, we were going to have Councilman Rawlson King also say something, and then we'll take up questions a little bit later in the program. So right now, I am going to introduce our second panelist speaker. He is also one of Ottawa's first Black, well, he is the first Black city councillor. So that's our second first Black important person in the room with regards to the role in Ottawa. We're all important, not trying to minimize anybody's role, but these gentlemen have a leading role in our community. So with this, I would like to introduce, again, our first Black city councillor, Mr. Rawlson King. He is the councillor for Ward 13, which is the Rideau Rockcliffe area. And I like to do these little dubs. I've dubbed him, he is the master of community service. He's a husband and a server of the community. When I reviewed his bio, as Chief Sloly has said, the bio is just a synopsis of the individual's accomplishments. We don't see the failures, but some of these accomplishments are very impressive. He has a Bachelor of Journalism with concentration in legal studies, and just like myself, a Master in Communication. I didn't go to Carleton U, but he did. He is highly seasoned communication professional with over 20 years of private sector experience in marketing, strategic communication, and high technology marketing research. He's also, in 2018, he served as the inaugural co-chair of the Ottawa Police Service Community as the on the Equity Council, which was seeking to improve relationships with police and Indigenous faith-based and racialized communities. He is the previous president for the Overbrook Community Association. He was a board member and treasurer for the Rideau Rockcliffe Community Resource Center. He was co-chair of the Ottawa Police Service Community. I mentioned that Equity Council. He was recognized for his volunteer work as he won the United Way Ottawa Community Builder of the Year Award. So with that, there are other things, but I'll leave it at that. And we will now ask Councilman Rawlings to go ahead. Again, I'll remind everyone, each speaker is getting 5 to 10 minutes. So go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. I really do appreciate Donna's invitation to participate on this session. I'd like to acknowledge our Chief of Police, Peter Sloly, who makes our community so proud and is really pursuing, I think, a transformational vision at the police service. And I'd also like to acknowledge, I did see my neighbor in Ward 11, Councillor Tim Tierney, who's also on this call and who always stands up for our community. He calls me often about multiple issues that affect the Black community and the new immigrant community. And I do appreciate that. I think, and I would love to really note and to ensure that that's recognized. You know, one of the reasons why I got into politics was to ensure change, just like was outlined, I guess, in my introduction. You know, I got involved because there are many challenges in my community, and there still are many challenges. You know, my ward has some of the highest levels of child poverty, approaching 50%. We have some of the highest food bank usage in the city, in just not just the city, in the province, to tell you the truth. And of course, a disproportionate number of people who are affected by poverty are racialized. They're from the Black and the Indigenous communities. What was especially driving me was ensuring that youth have better opportunities, our youth, because they ultimately are our future. And so one of the reasons why I got so involved in community volunteering was to really ensure that there were strong voices calling for investments that would benefit our youth in our communities. So sometimes this happens. Sometimes a nice guy wins in politics. It's not happen that often, but you know, I just considered myself a community guy wanting to improve the community, and that's one of the reasons why I put my name on a ballot. And I have this wonderful opportunity, and I use it every day to try to advance the cause of redressing systemic racism. Why? Because I heard time and time again from people, you know, that, and especially concerning an incident that occurred in my ward that I'll quickly get to. But what I hear often from community members is sometimes they are dismayed about individual acts of racism, and they acknowledge that those are going to happen. But when they are in front or seeking services from their governments or their public institutions, their expectation, living in a constitutional democracy that says everybody is equal, is that they should have equity of opportunity and equity of outcome when they're dealing with their government. So in the city of Ottawa, you know, we have really responded to requests by Indigenous, Black, racialized, and religious communities to establish an anti-racism secretariat to really try to redress these issues that will work towards the elimination of systemic racism in our municipal government's operations and services. In Ottawa, we have experienced discrimination through prejudice, ignorance, and racist stereotyping, as we know, which ultimately has led to disparities in income, employment, housing, healthcare, and education. In my own ward, just 1 month after my election in April 2019, as the first Black city councillor in the city's history, a Black family in Rideau Rockcliffe was subjected to a hate crime where a vandal left a message in black paint on their garage door that had a racially charged word followed by "get out." That was not a situation that we accepted as a community or a city. As we know, Ottawa has one of the highest rates of hate crimes amongst Canadian cities, according to numbers released by Statistics Canada. There were 105 hate crimes reported to police, or 9.8 incidents per 100,000 people in 2018. After a specific incident in my ward, we moved quickly as a community and as a city to actively take measures to eliminate systemic racism through the creation of an anti-racism office at the city. In the last budget, city committed funding for my proposal for the development of this anti-racism office, also for a corporate anti-racism strategy or specialist who would work on these issues. And I'm really proud that Mayor Watson and my council colleagues, including Tim Tierney, wholeheartedly embraced the creation of this new policy unit and position. The creation of the Anti-Racism Secretariat in Ottawa will target systemic racism by building an anti-racism approach into the way our city government develops policies, makes decisions, evaluates programs, and monitors outcomes. The policy unit would be a real manifestation of the city's equity and inclusion lens, building on the work that the city started in 2015. The Secretariat, as proposed, will seek to identify and eliminate systemic barriers for racialized people by, one, addressing employment equity. The City of Ottawa's workforce of 17,000 people does not reflect the 25% of people in Ottawa who are racialized, who are members of the Black community, particularly the city staff, upper management at the leadership decision-making level. Number two, the unit will work for equity in governance. The city's commissions, agencies, and boards have a direct impact on the decisions of our own lives as residents and should proportionally reflect Ottawa's population. Three, housing. Immigrants struggle with housing affordability due to long housing registry wait times. The city must invest more in housing and eliminate discrimination in housing policies. Number four, economic development. The city should provide equitable economic opportunities through social procurement and community benefit programs that promote economic inclusion for all of its residents. Often I hear, people walk around City Hall and they see, which is discouraging, they might just see Black people cleaning City Hall. What people were asking me at public consultation sessions are, why can't that person who's cleaning own the company and win the contract from the city to build greater economic opportunities? Number four, health outcomes. We know that there are a large number of health outcomes that are challenges for the Black community. We're seeing that with COVID-19 around data, around higher levels of infection. And we recognize that there isn't culturally sensitive investments, especially around mental health supports. So the city wants to work on that. And six, youth development. A 21st century economy requires and recreational opportunities to ensure young people prosper, especially in economically marginalized communities. These pillars will be the major areas of focus for consultation and action planning that will start in the new year. So the idea ultimately is that we will, as a city, go out to the community, ask for inputs, and then identify gaps. Once those gaps are identified, create policy prescriptions to really address those gaps. These new initiatives demonstrate, in my estimation, the seriousness in which government must take responsibility to identify when members of our community are denied equal opportunities to succeed and to eliminate the systemic barriers creating this inequality. We recognize that new immigrants, racialized communities, religious communities all call Ottawa home and have a right to fully participate in our city. And we want residents to know that as a city and as a council, which represents city government, that we are collectively committed. And I would hazard to say, though, it is a separate service. I believe that the police service, and I know that the police service under Chief Sloly is dedicated to this, is collectively committed to actual systemic change and to the elimination of racism in our city, which is ultimately long overdue. These discussions that Donna especially is driving are absolutely essential, if we want to achieve progress for equity of opportunity and equity of outcome for all residents of our city. And that's why I'm so gratified to have been invited to say a few words, maybe more than a few because I'm a politician, but to say a few words to you in terms of this important topic. Everybody should be treated equally in our city, and that's what we will strive for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Rawlson, sorry. I'm not used to saying your name, so it doesn't roll off my tongue. Maybe if I lived in Ottawa, so please forgive me.
I was born and raised in Toronto. The name, I understand the confusion with the name. Some people, even at the city, will go Councillor Rawlson. I know it is obscure. It is an obscure English surname, so people kind of sometimes juxtapose it. But the fun thing is, a lot of people come to me and say, that's such a unique name you have, Rawlson. And I'm like, I would have to say my father disagrees, because that's also my father's name.
I actually really love your name, Rawlson King. That's a beautiful name. But again, because I'm not in Ottawa, I don't, and my mom lives in the Rockcliffe area, so you would be her councilman. So if I was there, I would, know this, but I haven't been home in over a year since COVID has been a factor. So thank you very much. Appreciate all that you've said. I know we are going to be moving towards questions soon. Right now, I want to let the guests who are listening know that if they have a question, please just send your questions to either private message them to Jen Gonzalez or Julia Duckworth, and they're going to help me to gather the questions so that once we start the question period, I can ask different speakers and panelists to address each question. Now we have Kwesi, and I think there was Miss Haywood, and Mr. Tim Tierney is on the line, Councilman Tim Tierney. I know he's doing a dual role, but thank you for being here. And then I think there was one other individual from Nick is still here. Nick is with us. And so, and Geoff. Thank you, Geoff, for turning on. So right now, I'm going to ask the
Forgive me one
panelists.
quick second, if that's okay. I want to thank Councillor King and our chief. My name is Tim Tierney. I'm a city councillor in Beacon Hill, Seaville. And listen, my role tonight is just to listen. But I did want to, it's breaking news. I'm actually on a board called the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And I'm very proud to announce that something has changed from a national perspective. We just unanimously passed a committee for equality and anti-racism, and through all 2,000 member municipalities across the entire country. That speaks volumes that this is not just a localized issue, this is a national issue. And over the coming months, you're going to hear much more about this. Anyway, thank you very much for allowing me to listen in this evening. It's most appreciated.
Thank you very much. All right, appreciate your giving us that news, Mr. Tierney. So I was about to ask Miss Haywood, who lives here in America, if she would like to speak, and then just for a couple of minutes.
Well, I don't mind talking. I can talk for hours. I'm not entirely sure what I'm talking about.
Okay, so
Happy Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving here in the US, so
yes,
there is a bit of a commotion going on downstairs with the turkey and the stuffing and the football. But I am more than happy to talk to everyone here. Again, I'm happy to be here. But just some feedback.
Okay. I was asked to ask if you, Geoff, Nick, and Kwesi wanted to address some of our previous questions that had been asked before. And how about I include DonnaDickson to say what she was really hoping to hear from you all. DonnaDickson, I'm putting you on the spot right now, because you are the lead.
Well, because we have some new people that wasn't here the last time, I thought maybe one or two of you guys would like to just give us a 3-minute blitz of your own little stories.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
All right, so my name's Talia McGuire Haywood. I was born in Ottawa, lived in Ottawa up until about 8.5, 9 years ago. My husband played for the CFL. He played for the Renegades and then moved on to other teams, but he played for 9 seasons for the CFL, and he's from here, from San Diego, so we eventually moved to San Diego. In moving to San Diego, I worked with the Southern California Native population. So California is primarily the Kumeyaay Nation. So I worked with 7 consortium tribes, and I worked in domestic violence, primarily domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking, and stalking victims, and was unfortunately privy to see the amount of systemic racism that goes on within the Indigenous and Native American community as well. I've since moved to New Mexico to continue doing the work with Navajo Nation. And so not only with the Black community, but with the Native community, I'm really invested on bringing awareness to DV and what goes on within that. So I have 4 girls. I'm Ashton. This whole beautiful platform is in my stepbrother's name. And so I am so happy and so glad that we're getting to have this conversation and bring awareness to all of this. So that's me.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm going to stop the clock so it doesn't go off because you did that in really excellent time. And as I had mentioned to everyone, I'm sort of having this clock going to help us to stay on track. And this time around, I'm going to ask that if the clock happens to go off and you're in mid-sentence, please just finish your statement and so we can move on to the next person. But this being said, we've had one question come in, and we also wanted to finish up with a couple of the questions that were not addressed the last time. And so what I'm going to do is start us off with our first question that was being posed to both city councilmen and actually, no, I'm going to ask this other question first before I do that. The 2 questions that had come in. Sorry, just give me 1 second. You have to. Any of the panelists can answer this question. And the question is, when it comes to voter suppression, please let us know if you believe this is existent in Canada. What are your views about voter suppression in Canada? Is this seen as a detrimental issue as it is in the US? And please indicate if you agree or disagree and explain your answer. So is voter suppression existent in Canada? Is it an issue? Is it something that we are seeing right now in Canada?
I would say, as an elected official, that there are definite differences between the American political climate and the Canadian political climate and the environment. So we have strong traditions around elections. We don't have this type of discussion that's really predominating the United States about voter suppression, about gerrymandering, about these types of things, because we have a different political system and a different political history. And so the reality is that we have very modern election laws, strong laws that are mostly defined by clear standards across jurisdictions. And so we have very fair, free elections. I think the challenge is political engagement at the electoral level. So we are seeing lower rates of participation at the ballot box. But I think that that's being offset by more activism in terms of people protesting or really getting involved in activist issues, especially younger people. But I would say that we still have reasonably high rates of engagement, at least at the federal and provincial level, in terms of our elections. They are fair and they are free and they are transparent. We have standards Those standards are maintained by independent agencies, so they're not subjected as much to political interference as in the United States. So I think we do have differences here, and we have a different political system where we have a fused government in a sense. So the executive sits in the legislature, which is completely different and allows for a completely different type of accountability. Because that person who is a leader of a government or a leader of a party has to answer questions on a regular basis in the legislature posed by an opposition. And so, you know, they aren't these individual segments that are siloed from one another. And I think that that's also very important and a large difference in our political climate. So night and day in terms of Canada and the United States, in my estimation. The challenge still is that we are a country of many new immigrants, people who become citizens, people who are becoming citizens from countries that, where they might have been refugees, and have the different type of perception of government and its intervention. And often some people do not want to be involved in politics, and that is one of the challenges that we do have in Canada. And we have to ensure, especially from racialized communities, that people get involved. And this is the last, because I know I'm going on a little bit. This is the last component. When I went to university, you sit down in a political science class, and you sit down and you say, "What is politics?" And, there's a German sociologist that simply said that politics is the division of scarce resources, right? You're determining amongst an electorate and amongst different factions where money will be spent. And if we're not around the table, and if we're not participating at all in the political process, we will not have a say. So we want to ensure that increases in Canada. So more people who typically have not had a say will have one.
Thank you very much. Okay. I like your answer, but I will be honest, when I heard the question, I thought, well, I didn't think that it really existed in Canada. So thank you for helping us to know that it is an important factor for us to consider, and it's not quite as bad as the US, but it is something that is real. I am now going to ask question number 2. Does the social media embolden the cowards and gives a platform to the subversive racism that exists here in Canada? And so, if so, how does this happen? And what can be done to meet this new challenge and change it? I am going to ask one of our, maybe Geoff. I know that's a little bit of a big question, but I'm going to ask you, Geoff, if you could address that question.
Because I'm the millennial, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for that. As someone, again, I approach a lot of things from a historical perspective, as well as my teaching perspective, being someone who's in a university classroom and who's affecting change in the inner city of Ottawa at Immaculata. I do see social media and rampant social media use, as we know. It's something that's very, very commonplace these days. And obviously, we know the power of it in a positive way. We can get information out. We can kind of give information and use it. However, we, of course, see the negative side. And I'm sure Chief Sloly can attest to that. As some of those police officers that come into our schools and they work with the staff, they see a lot of cases that do involve harassment, cyberbullying, many things that are involved on different platforms like TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, where people can, hide behind a social media profile. And the idea of that not only starts with cyberbullying in the sense where these Gen Z kids are getting harassed for, social aspects of their lives, but we're talking about 12 to 13-year-old kids in my case that are, kind of seeing and experiencing new things in the world, where they're hearing the N-word for the first time. They're hearing someone say the F word for the first time. And I'm not talking about swearing. I'm talking about for my LGBTQ plus community, be someone being called that and whatnot. And just from a personal experience, again, I have dealt with recently in the last 2 weeks, somebody at Immaculata in my classroom, in fact, had gone through a situation where this word, the word that we're talking about, the N-word, was used towards her in a derogatory manner by another student. And so again, this happened not only face to face, but also behind the screen of social media. And these are things that it gives these people a sense of power, because they can mask themselves at the end of the day, and they don't have to own up to the word, anything that they say at the end of the day, until they are caught. So and whatever caught means, it could be a principal, it could be the police officer that catches the case, and whatever. But again, these are things that if we're looking at them long term, for a 13-year-old kid to be called these things, growing up, that has long-term effects on a student. Going forward, I do feel for this kid. She's a very bright student, and she does very well in my class and other classes, and she's currently on student council with us. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but she's very involved in the political landscape of Immaculata itself. So for her, dealing with this situation is kind of heartbreaking as a teacher, and then also as someone who believes in equality in every sense of the word. So for me, when I see, again, social media being used in that sense from a teaching perspective, I do tell my students at the end of the day to watch what they post, watch what they say, also watch who they interact with. You have to understand that, it comes with, like, you might think somebody is your friend, or you might think that you're trying to be cool for somebody in whatever aspect that is. But those people can just as easily turn around and betray you, so on and so forth. And it's a huge issue, because we see it done very quickly on social media. Like I said, they can hide behind those words. They can hide behind these things that they say without any real repercussion, and it's a long-term effect. Anyway, I'm rambling, but you kind of get the idea of where I'm going with this, and where my head is at with that.
And if you just permit me just one moment too, my feeling is that from the political perspective, it degrades civilized discourse. I mean, everything is not black and white. We know that there's complexity. And I think that that's erased, social media really leads to the erasure of that. This is important, having real conversations with real people that is attempting to really foster meaningful change. How often can you really apply that to social media when you're looking at it and the way that people are interacting with one another? And so I think it creates a danger for us, in terms of, while there was a liberating perspective of this technology, and I studied communication, so I learned this lesson actually in the classroom, where I really thought that there was this that would be a completely liberating force. It would engender all that is good, and it would usher in some new democratic impulses. Those were my feelings in 99, 2000, 2001. And I had a professor who just looked at me and said, Rawlson, it's a false idea to think that our technologies are neutral. They do engender the biases that we have as human beings, and they will be used as such. And so, yes, we're going to see, the circulation of hate through that, which is not surprising. Days after I was elected, I made the mistake of going on to Reddit and seeing, disparaging comments about myself, not just myself, but my predecessor. And you look at that, and that you understand that this might engender hate. The frustration, I think, for a politician is that it engenders kind of this coarse discourse that is nihilistic in a way. There's no way to actually have a functional discussion and dialogue with anybody. And I think that that's dangerous to a democracy, because we actually require dialogue to reach some level of consensus. So my feeling is, I take it with a grain of salt. The real conversations don't happen over Twitter or Facebook for me. They happen in rooms like this. So thank you, Donna, for inviting us to have real conversations.
Thank you. With regards to social media, I know that many different people have, there are dangers with social media, but I personally feel there are times that it's useful, because we're able to hear things and everything. Hold on, I'm hearing an echo back. Sorry, I don't know why that was kind of strange.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear you, Kwesi.
Okay. I'll hop in here with the social media aspect of things. I picked up on a trend. Basically, the trend is, rather than the typical racist making a comment to a person of color, what's happening now increasingly is that someone who is racist or prejudiced or a bigot will create just a fake profile and assume the persona of a person of color, and then take shots at other people of color, basically to try and sow the seeds of division within, not just with other communities, but within, say, for example, the Black community themselves, perpetuating colorism, perpetuating, sexism against whether it's Black women or dark-skinned people, or the reverse, taking on the image of a light-skinned person to then take a shot at a dark-skinned person. And then it's bickering back and forth, which for the most part will live online. But it does pose a danger. Once these things, for the most part, things stay online. But the moment you get into like doxing, or, people can geolocate, people from a post. If you put your location in there on a post and somebody, is able to geolocate you, it then it can become a real world problem. So I'm noticing this a lot. Right now, there's a sort of a digital war of misinformation between the Black community and the Indigenous community, and seeing how we have, both in Canada and the US, sort of a alliance. Things like that, if they keep going and they keep, that snowball keeps rolling down the hill, it can turn into something else. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you. I just need to fix a couple of things. So what we're going to do is we are going to fix our settings right now. And what we ask, once I'm going to mute everyone just for a moment. Actually, I'm going to ask Jen to go ahead and do that, including me, Jen. All right. So going forward, what we're going to ask is that the panelists, we will communicate with you by sending the unmute request towards you, so that you, when we ask you your questions, we will ask you to unmute and then you answer the question. And this way we just keep the flow nice and clean and we don't hear anyone's background. With that being said, I'm going to turn the next question to Chief Sloly. So Chief Sloly, first we want to say thank you very much. We're so grateful that you are Ottawa's first Black Chief of Police. And this question is, how can we support you to push forward with the agenda of racialized communities in terms of public health, social support? For example, in recreation, the youth in the poorest of Ottawa neighborhoods have the worst facilities. And that sends a message, and it's a missed opportunity to use activities. They love to build them and the community up. So what can we do to support you as the police chief in all you're doing in trying to build up these areas? And there is a second portion to that question. So I'm gonna find you. This is a lot harder than it looks. There's a lot of names to scroll through. There you are.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's a lot. The question I understand is how can the police, or the police chief in particular, support communities anywhere in Ottawa around building critical community infrastructure, particularly infrastructure like community centers and facilities that young people can use. That's actually been for me, one of the most inspiring and awakening aspects of my policing journey. When I was first promoted to inspector in 1999, I was assigned to 31 Division in Toronto. And for those of you that don't know the Toronto area, that would be sort of the Jane Finch Downsview area. Traditionally a very difficult part of the city. All the usual social determinants of health, underinvestment in social infrastructure, critical infrastructure, economic education challenges. And yes, of course, given those circumstances, there was a lot of gang activity that was coming out of those socioeconomic circumstances. When I arrived there as an inspector, I got to know some of the local councillors, and one of the councillors in a particular ward that had a very challenged small neighborhood that had a disproportionate amount of crime and really low levels of social infrastructure, no community center, no youth center, no sports facilities. Her name was Maria Ajameri, and she asked, as a new inspector, would I be interested in coming down and touring the community, seeing what was going on the ground, not from a crime perspective, but from an infrastructure perspective. So I went down, we went for patrol, and she showed me, you got houses, cheek and jowl houses, one road in, no access for commerce to develop, no real access for fire, ambulance. It was a very enclosed design, and there was no place for the kids to play, not even a stitch of grass from the play on. And she asked if I would join in on a joint approach to City Council for a funding allotment, a capital funding allotment, to redesign the community and including a small youth facility. It was a $10 million request out of a multi-billion-dollar budget in the City of Toronto. But for me, it was the first time when I realized if I put my name and my office to a local councillor's efforts supported by the local community, we got a $10 million capital allotment for that community, and it made a big difference in the lives of that community. And even years on, it's actually helped to reduce the amount of crime and victimization. Jump forward to about a decade ago, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment partnered with the Toronto Police to create a combination ice rink in the wintertime, basketball rink in the summertime, right in the heart of 51 Division, Regent Park, North and South Regent Park, before the revitalization process came in. It was a bridge investment from the private sector, while the larger joint public-private revitalization of the entire area took place. So for a 2-year period, the kids in that area had meaningful, well-established social infrastructure, sports infrastructure, until the larger revitalization project could come in. Councillor King, you'll recall almost a year ago today, we had the Winterfest conversation down on Spark Street, where you and I, on the back of a napkin, were literally starting to draw out, you know, a similar $10 million approach. How could we go to federal and provincial governments to co-sponsor through the right agencies that I would rely on you to help me to navigate capital funding programs for just this type of thing. And the last thing I will say, I've had conversations with Minister McKenna, whose portfolio includes infrastructure investment across Canada. And I've asked her to start to think of how we could get large federal infrastructure money to come into communities like Heron's Gate, Bayshore, and through the community's design, create the type of social infrastructure that could help to advance public safety, community safety, and well-being, and where I'd be willing to put my signature, the Ottawa Police Service's efforts to support whatever coalition we could pull together to get access to those federal funds. So long and the short of it is, I've had experience. We've been able to successfully do it through municipal budgets, through private sector partnerships, through public-private partnerships. I believe the ability is there to do it through federal and provincial grants. A lot of that underpins community safety and well-being. Those are all opportunities we have, but we just have to put our minds together and really get organized on it. That's the key. You got to get organized. You got to get focused, and you got to put the work in, not for one day, 1 week, 1 month. You got to put the work in. Sometimes it can take a year or more, but it can get done.
Thank you, Chief Sloly. So Chief Sloly, are you saying, just to clarify, I understand putting our heads together, are you wanting community organizations such as ADYE and other community organizations to sort of come together with the police to come up with some of these ideas? Or is there another way to do it? Oh, I don't know why you got muted. I didn't mute you. Sorry, just a second. Gotta go back down.
Thank you. In the past, I'll be honest, in the past, I'm a type A kind of quadruple A type of leader, and I run around and let's go get stuff done. Let's go get stuff done. That's still part of my DNA. It's who I am. But as I'm learning more as a police executive and as a police chief, and particularly being new to Ottawa, I actually think it's a better formula when the local community says, hey, we've got this idea here.
Right. Okay.
We want you to come down and learn about it. We want you to get involved in it. Tell us what you think you can bring to the game. Here's what we want you to try to bring. I think that's actually a better formula. I think it's going to have a longer and deeper impact if it's more community-led than institutional-led. Now, I'm all willing to lead big projects. Don't get me wrong. But I think for this type of issue, it's actually better if it's more grassroots up than treetop down. It can still go both ways. I mean, I might have an idea, you might have an idea, we figure it out in the middle, but I actually think these are better grassroots up ideas and coordinate it through the counselor's office, get the local BIA involved, find local business leaders, and yes, find institutional leaders like myself, like the head of education, like Dr. Etches. We got Camille Williams-Taylor, we got Dr. Etches, you got myself. There's a rich group of leaders who all think very much alike, and we all want to help with these type of grassroots initiatives, but we don't want to come in and say, hey, this is what I think you need to do in Heron's Gate. This is what I think you need to do in Bayshore or Ritchie. Like, who are you, man? You don't even know who we are here, right? So try to find that balance.
I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense that it is something that we all work together and come together and do, and it's not you want us to help you by coming to you with the ideas that we need you to help us with, if I understood what you're saying. Now, I'm going to turn to Nick. Nick, there was something you wanted to, you had your hand up, so just going to find you. I thought I had you and unmuted you. Just give me one more second here. There's a lot of people joining the room, so it's a matter of finding the person and unmuting them. And Jen, if you can help me, because I'm trying to find them and I can't find them.
There we go. Can you guys hear me clearly?
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
All right. First and foremost, thanks for having me this evening. Thank you very much for creating this platform for us so that we can have these discussions. Special hello to our councilman and Chief of Police Peter Sloly. Thank you for coming out. We really do appreciate it. So the first thing that I wanted to, well, I got a ton I want to address, and we definitely don't have enough time. The first thing that I'm just gonna well, the first question I'm going to pose is actually to one of our panel members, Geoff. So in regards to the social media bullying question, I often find that whenever I'm confronted with new information that may conflict with my belief system or whatever information that I had previously, I then stop, remove emotion, I critically analyze, I try to look at, you know, what is the source, right? What is their intent behind what the messaging is, et cetera. You know, it's just something that you learn when, well, at least I learned when I went to post-secondary school. Now, this is where I'm posing the question to you, Geoff, for students who haven't had the opportunity to reach post-secondary education yet, just because of their age or circumstances down the road, is there anything being done in school now? Because I'm very far removed from high school, as it pertains to the curriculum that teaches the youth to critically analyze the information that they're being presented with, because I think that would be a really good tool to essentially arm these students with the ability to sift through all the misinformation that's out there. Because, you know, anyone can go ahead and put a post and claim it's legitimate, but if you don't know how to analyze that information, then, you know, you can fall victim to all the bad actors out there. Yeah, Geoff, if you could chime in on that. I have more, by the way. Please don't just cut me off afterwards.
Thanks for that, Nick. Appreciate you asking me that question. So yeah, I mean, great question first off, but second of all, you're absolutely nailing it in terms of asking the right things. Definitely since we've been in high school, there's been a shift towards social media awareness in classrooms. We treat it in Catholic school, in the Catholic board through our religious and family studies section. So during our family studies section in class, we actually do spend time. We have a whole unit based on, we call it the Good Samaritan, and it's learning how to leverage digital media and understanding how to understand digital media in that sense. And that's all facets of digital media, whether it's anti-bullying, whether it's siphoning articles that could be fake news or whatever you want to call it. But this does exist as a platform now. However, we don't really treat it as its own class or its own, you know, I guess, realm. It's included in the curriculum through the religious studies and family studies class. And we do that about 3 times a week, at least in my classroom. I have it 3 times. And then on top of that, we spend about, I would say, a good 2 months. It's right at the beginning of the year, grades 7 and 8. I can't speak for the younger ages based on their curriculum. I'm not too familiar with that. I'm very immersed in intermediate curriculum and high school. But for anybody between the ages of 12 and 14 currently is going through some sort of digital media training and training to understand how social media is manipulating them and how it's also affecting their lives positively and negatively.
Thank you. I did receive another question. So, Chief, are you still with us? I know we're going back and forth between the social media, and I don't want to get stuck on the social media issue. We want to try and create some solutions to systemic racism. And so this is why I'm trying to make sure that we don't spend too much time on one area. And Nick, I thank you for readdressing the question to Geoff. but we did have another question for the chief on a, so Chief, here's the question. Again, we thank you for being Ottawa's police chief, but the question is, we can appreciate your role is not being easy. And what challenges have you personally experienced being a Black police chief? And what have you done to overcome some of those challenges? And I think part of the logic is understanding where you've been, and as a leader in the community, hopefully that lead can be followed through elsewhere. So gonna ask you to respond to that question. There's a lot of scrolling, Jen. I need your help. You're faster than I am.
Okay, thank you. I shared a link for the previous question around digital literacy resources. There's lots of really good quality products out there, by the way. So I'm not endorsing it, but there's a lot of good products for folks out there for your kids at home, teachers, etc. And I think it's a very important issue that Nick raised. Probably a subject all on its own for another call. Let me start by answering this question. Yes, I have suffered direct attacks based on my skin color and my place of origin. Religion has also been weaponized against me. It's a hard one to explain, and for some personal reasons, I won't go into it today. But a variety of attempts to derail me as a human being and as a professional, and in my most recent office as chief of police. I experienced this in Scarborough growing up as a kid, coming here as an immigrant. I experienced it representing Canada in the men's national soccer team. I experienced it in my rookie days as a police officer in the Toronto Police Service, to literally my last day in office there. To a lesser degree in private sector, I was surprised. I thought I'd find it a lot worse in private sector. Although when I joined Deloitte as a partner in 2016 in a national private organization with 1,200 partners across the entire country, I was one of only 2 Black partners. Now, the first year I was hired, that number doubled, but that was still a clear indication of systemic barriers for advancement to the highest levels within a private sector organization. I know that organization has done a lot since then to advance diversity and equity to the highest levels, but when I first started 4 years ago, it was pretty pathetic, to be honest, and I had that conversation with the CEO. And yes, I think it's well known that in my time here in office in Ottawa, I've been the subject of a very racist video meme that was posted on social media. But I want to be clear, that video not only targeted me and my skin color, but it targeted the Indigenous community. It targeted broadly the racialized communities, and it was posted on the eve of Rosh Hashanah, depicting the Nazi Third Reich, which murdered millions of Jews. And for me, that of all the despicable elements in it, that was the one I found most shocking. Now listen, with the territory of a public figure, and Councillor King, Councillor Tierney, I know you understand this. It comes with the territory, unfortunately. It should not be ever accepted. It cannot be unaddressed, but it can't be such a focus of our individual response to it that we fail to carry out our larger leadership responsibilities. And I've really had to be careful. I've learned better as time goes on, and I'm still learning. You got to pick your fights. So believe me, if I find out who put that video out there, I will do my best not only to defend my character, but if there is an appropriate recourse to pursue that individual, to send a message that I won't stand for it, and I won't stand for it being done to anybody else. But I'm not going to be so blind to all my other responsibilities in pursuing that individual that I fail to be an effective leader. I fail to effectively address the larger systemic issues that Councillor King and others have so effectively articulated. Ultimately, my responsibility is not to defend my reputation, but to advance this institution to support everybody in society. So I'm always checking myself, how much time and energy do I need to defend myself versus how much time and energy do I need to advance institutional change, societal change? And that's a tricky balance. It's a very tricky balance, and I'm learning to get it more right. The number one support for a person like me, a person like Councillor King, is if we know we have a broader team of people behind us. Our family and our friends, our faith community, civil leaders like Rawlson King, Dr. Etches, Councillor Deans. If we know there's a broader coalition of the willing to step in front, stand beside, and support from behind, then we can be more focused on what we need to get done and not get distracted or derailed by those personal attacks. So I'll pause there, but I think it's an excellent question, and I hope I gave some justice to who asked it.
All right, thank you very much. So moving forward, I did have another question. I'm not sure how many people in the room have heard of SMART goals, because the whole idea of this health discussion is coming up with creative ways to find a solution and help us to come together as a community when it comes to systemic racism, when it comes to different issues that not only is happening in Ottawa, but throughout Canada, throughout our world, as we all know. Here in the US, you know, they're calling for, well, we don't hear it as much now, but they wanted to do this cutback and cut out police funding. And I realize that we do need to tweak some of the things that are being done, but we don't need to cut police funding. So one of the things I want to ask about is SMART goals. And just in case you don't know, SMART goals is goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. And so when it comes to systemic racism, can we, right now, everyone who is in this Zoom session, help us to come up with some SMART goals? Can we say that SMART goals could be created? And if so, I'd like to hear from the panelists of some of the things, or even one thing that we could put together to say, let's create this SMART goal to address systemic racism. And that question is open for anyone of the panelists.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So we were talking about some SMART goals in
Yes.
terms of some changes. I think here in the US, I don't know, I haven't lived in Canada for almost 9 years now, but I know here in the US, we have a community task force or police accountability teams that have been organized. People have come out and taught the community, you know, their rights, understanding some of the laws that police are hired to uphold. So understanding, you know, discrimination rights, and understanding arrest, you know, search and seizure rights, and being able to understand your rights so that when you are arrested, you know how to have that interaction. Also, just how to film the police for police accountability, legally film the police, peacefully film the police, creating organizations or community organizations that help with, this is my niece, sorry. Skyly B, give me 1 second, honey. Giving some, just having, I just totally lost my train of thought. She's so cute.
Children do that to us at times, right?
They do that to us. I had a whole spiel and I've totally lost it. So I'm gonna pass it on to Nick, because I know he's got some things to say.
Okay, Nick, did you have a response for the SMART goal? And then Rawlson King had his hand up.
Okay, well, in regards to the smart goal smart goal planning, I mean, I guess we're kind of in the midst of it right now. I mean, when Mr. King spoke earlier, he addressed some of the initiatives that he's working on, or the city is working on, to take a structured approach, an organized approach to addressing these issues. So absolutely, efforts like that within our institutions, that's fantastic. To just, I guess, echo what was already said. So discussions like this are great, but what I think, we're all like-minded here. Everyone in this discussion is like-minded. We all want to work towards a positive end as it pertains to systemic racism, right? I would like to invite some people to the table that are highly skeptical about, systemic racism. The people that generally get triggered when they hear things like, white privilege, or that there's racism within our institutions, because generally speaking, there's discord between us and them. It's just two sides that don't see eye to eye, and I would like to create discourse, right? Like, we need to have a discussion, find out why is it that you have the opinion that you have based on your experiences, and then we can share our experiences with them and our realities, and perhaps we can find some common ground. Because at the end of the day, like, I'm a firm believer that when people are food secure, shelter secure, financially secure, a lot of the stresses just kind of melt away, and there's no need for this primal tribalism that we have. That being said, though, I want to jump on this opportunity really quick. I understand that Councillor King, you're a member of the Ottawa Police Services Board, I believe, if that is correct. And I understand there was a vote against the OPS draft budget increase of $13.2 million. And it's my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were the sole person who voted against that budget increase. I'd just like to ask why? What were your motivations behind that, if that's in fact, if my information is accurate? And then on the back end of that, Chief Sloly, I'd like to know, what is it that the OPS is going to do with those funds? Are there initiatives in place that will essentially benefit minority communities? Also, I'm aware of racism within the OPS. There's that horrible meme that was circulated months ago. I'd like to know what's happening internally to mend the attitude within the OPS.
Sure. So I'll give it a first shot. One of the key things I did, firstly, I want to preface the fact that I've only been on Police Services Board for 4 weeks. So I've been recently sworn in, and obviously took a fresh new perspective in terms of the way that I looked at things. And I also listened diligently to all of the delegations that were made. So in total, there were over 150 delegations that were made. And I didn't vote in favor of the police budget, since my preference was not to increase expenditures beyond meeting the statutory employment obligations and collective agreement increases without a better public consultation framework, especially for equity-seeking groups. Because what I heard as I was listening through to all those delegations was that people wanted to see a more advanced approach towards a public consultation. What people don't understand about the Police Services Board is that it's pretty prescribed in terms of what we do. So we have no operational control over the police service, and I agree with that, because we live in a democracy, and the police should have independence from politicians and elected officials. We shouldn't be the ones giving any directives in terms of the operations, but we give a strategic direction. And that strategic direction needs to be informed with community input. Now, the way that our system is structured in Ontario, we have a board of appointees from the province, and also people who are selected from council. But the board doesn't report to council. There are structures that really determine that the people who are around the table represent the community interests. And when I was listening to the delegations, what I was hearing was a lack of inputs from those delegates from a wider community. And I really thought that it is necessary for us to work on ensuring that we have maximal community input. Now, the good news is, despite the fact that I dissented, I really do believe that Chair Deans and the rest of the board and the police chief, Peter Sloly, in the structure of the police service, which is separate, are really dedicated and have a collective commitment to transformational change. And we saw that with the motions that were actually advanced. So there were amendments and amended motions to the budget that looked at reducing the number of police officers hired by the service, and looking at that number being allocated more towards social work or other social engagements. We saw the approval of a mediated consultation process to really attempt to build trust and enhance trust with Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities. And we also saw the establishment of a task force that will seek a funding freeze around the 2022 budget and have that at 2021 levels. But I think the most important thing was that the budget that was passed still was seeking transformation in terms of equity in policing, because there was a recognition that the police service should look like the community that it is serving. And at the same time, outside of the community, outside of the police service, the community itself needs to be dealt with dignity, respect, and we have to ensure, that rights are respected. So I think that we are on the right track, and I actually am supportive of the transition and the transformation that is being undertaken at the police service. But I thought, after watching all those delegations, that people were calling for different types of engagement mechanisms that would provide for more meaningful input from a wider array of the community. And so that's why I dissented. But like I said, I think the good news is after this budget, in terms of the motions that were being passed, we were seeing greater commitments by the board, by the chair, and continuously by the chief of police to ensure that we do have maximal engagement. Because I think if we are talking about Black Lives Matter and Indigenous Lives Matter, we have to listen to Black and Indigenous voices, and they have to really meaningfully inform the policies that we move forward with before we see any expansion in a budget. But I think the good news is we were listening, and we indicated that, and Chair Deans clearly indicated that through the establishment of a task force that would look to reduce our budgets. And the key thing is, and I know that the chief also had said this, he wants ultimately to be out of a job. And I think that's where we all are around and it sounds like, it sounds strange, but it's true. I mean, who wants to be arresting people? We don't want our police officers to be social workers. I mean, I think that there's unanimity here in terms of those facts. And so it's a question of how we get there. And the problem that I see, and I I was moderating a session on police and justice reform yesterday. I know I'm going on a little bit long here, but the reality is that we were hearing, the fact that we need to have this transformational shift. I think that police services understand that. They're listening to people. Unfortunately, we do have a very fractious, political environment, like I was saying, where people just look at yay and nay, just like at council. And the reality is that the world is a more complex place. And, we have to be looking at these complex solutions. And I think that Police Services Board is actually doing that. But the last thing I'll leave you with is the idea that the Police Services Board is constrained in what it does. It hires a chief. It provides, evaluation for what the chief is doing. It sets priorities through a budget, and it deals with collective agreements. And it doesn't do anything that is operational, and it doesn't have, more formal mechanisms of community engagement that I think people want to see. And that's something that I personally want to see. I want to see communities setting more priorities. I think the chief can speak to the fact that we do have a community and well-being framework now that will allow for communities to do that. And we have a more advanced view of how policing should go forward across the board. So I want to be supportive of that process, but in my no vote, I also wanted to indicate that there are challenges around consultation and that those need to be improved. The good news is that I think everybody around the table at the board, our chair and our police chief understands that, and we are moving forward to really redress those issues.
Thank you, Rawlson, Councillor Rawlson. The next question that has been posed, and I know the chief has an emergency, so we appreciate your staying to answer this last question, chief. And I will just ask it so everyone hears the question. It's a three-part question, and we are wondering, someone in the audience is wondering, what initiatives are being done to address anti-Black racism within the police force? Where do you stand, or where do you place the Ottawa Police in their journey to become a bias-free workplace, aside from hiring invisible minorities? What is being done to address current cultural issues?
Thank you for that. Whoever posed the series of questions, very important ones. Can I just explain? You've seen me on the phone a couple of times. I apologize. I'm not intending any disrespect. We've had a many hours long search for a person who was we were concerned was going to harm themselves, and unfortunately, it hasn't worked out. It's been a tragic outcome, and it's going to require my full involvement overnight. So I will answer this question because I think it's at the heart of why you invited me here today, but I have to resume my official duties in this other matter. And I just wanted you to understand that I'm not leaving to disrespect anybody or to cut short my involvement. If it was anything short of the nature of this matter involving a loss of life, I would continue on with my own folks managing it, but this requires my personal intervention. So within the budget that we just discussed, let me start there and then I'll work backwards to what we did over the last year. We have set aside specific amounts of funds to provide anti-Black, anti-Indigenous racism training, as well as cultural and intercultural competency development to our members. I will state first, while training is always an important component of any approach to addressing systemic racism, I actually don't believe it's one of the best approaches. I'm not an educator, that's not my area of expertise, but it's been my experience in 30 years of policing, and in 25 of those years, overseeing a wide variety of training efforts to address issues of personal bias and discrimination and racism, all the isms, all the way through to systemic. that training in of itself is not particularly impactful. Development, like cultural competency development, intercultural competency development, has more ability to change the thinking, decision-making, and behavior of individuals and sustain that over the course of time. And while it hasn't been done extensively in policing, the research that I've seen shows that it is likely going to have a bigger impact for actually less cost. And I'm more interested in that development, intercultural competency development, than in the anti-racism training. But we're going to make investments in both areas. Going back to what we've done in my first year here. When I arrived, there were some 5 or 6 major reviews that had been done in the previous 10 years, everything from a gender equity study to 2 different reports done in conjunction with the Ontario Human Rights Commission on racial profiling, stopping racialized members of the community for driving offenses. We were one of the first police agencies in Ontario to do a partnership with the Ontario Human Rights Commission on a demographic race-based analysis of a core police operation. And there's a significant body of research. It's all available on the Ottawa Police website if you want to read about it. I think that shows that this is a police service that, yes, has acknowledged its problems, has worked with external credible agencies to do race and demographic-based analysis around which to learn from that analysis how we need to make changes. That speaks, I think, to the second part. Where are we on the journey? We're on that journey. I think we're further down the road than almost any other police service in Canada to really doing meaningful research using third parties who have credibility and expertise, and then taking those recommendations and using them to change the organization. That said, I wasn't satisfied, even with that record of success, that we had done anywhere near enough to change the culture, the operations, and the individual attitudes within the organization. So we took all those various reports, we combined them into one report that we call the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Plan. And we identified the top 10 actions that we needed to do this year in order to advance EDI within the organization. Again, that's all available on the Ottawa Police website. We've made substantial progress on most of those. We've completed some of them. The ones we've completed, up until I came, there was only one person in the entire organization whose job was to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion. Full-time job.
Wow.
Of an organization of over 2,000 people serving 1 million people, there ain't enough hours in the day, days in the weeks in the month, months in the year, years in the decade to get much done. So what I've done is I've built an entire directorate.
Oh,
Superintendent, supported by 2 directors, and we have 10-fold increased the amount of staff from middle management right down to frontline in order to build a new capacity, and all of that reports directly into me as the chief of police. It doesn't go into a deputy and then to me, directly into me. So Superintendent Isabel Granger, who herself is a person of color, who has a history and an expertise, certification, global credibility in the area of EDI, is the leader of that directorate, and she's supported by subject matter experts. We just hired our first EDI specialist. Literally, this is her first week on the job, and Rawlson, at some point, I'll want to introduce her to you so she can get connected into what you're building at the city. So all of this did not exist before I arrived. It now all exists now, and it exists because of our EDI action plan. Now we're going into the next year. We're refreshing that entire list of 10 for 10 new priorities. We're going to resource those priorities. We're going to bring in the Community Equity Council that Rawlson helped to create, and other stakeholders, including the new Anti-Racism Directorate at the city, to help us to build that out to the next level and the next level and the next level. I don't want to talk about things. I don't want to study things. I don't want to write about things. I want to get things done. We've been studied to death, recommended to death. There's enough reports to choke us to death. I want to focus on getting stuff done. And I want people who can help me to get that stuff done. So I apologize. I will have to leave the call now. I'm, again, very grateful. Donna, everybody who organized this, my panel colleagues who've taken tough questions and I think provided honest answers, and for everybody who's taken time out of your busy lives to participate in this. I'm so grateful, and thank you so much. I'll be happy to come back again on another similar event like this and make myself available. So thank you and God bless, folks.
Thank you very much, Chief Sloly. We appreciate your coming. We appreciate all that you've said, and we understand why you have to go. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate you coming in, and we will be inviting you back, hopefully.
Thank you.
All right, now we're going to continue with the questions. But before we continue with the questions, please know everyone who is in this session right now, if you look in your chat, there is a Google form that we are looking for you to provide feedback, both the panelists and the guests who are joining in and providing questions. We're asking that you would complete that whenever you could. And now we're going to move on. Okay, so our next question, I am so sorry. I wanted to go back to the SMART solutions or goals. I know that we have Mr. King with us, and getting specific with coalitions and having community organizations coming together. What are some specific things that these community organizations can do to bring to you, Mr. King, to bring to Mr. Tierney, to help to advance reduction of systemic racism? So I'm hoping that either Ms. T, Geoff, Mr. King, Nick. I know, Nick, you said that, Quasi, you haven't said anything yet, and I don't know if you're able to give us some input on this. Go ahead. Can't hear you, Quasi. You're kind of low.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So from 2013-ish to 2016-ish, I was involved with a program in the West End that targeted the, neighborhoods such as Bayshore, Ritchie, Ramsey, Caldwell, West End neighborhoods. And it was specifically for individuals aged 16 to 29. And the program was, they refer to them as youth, even though 29 is, I don't think it's youth, but it's good. It's good to have that kind of wide of a range. So they would have a program where people would present their ideas, small business ideas, in which the startup cost was no more than $2,000, all right? And I know the question was systemic racism, but I'm approaching this a different way because I believe that and I've seen this with my own eyes. I work in addictions. I work in sort of the homeless shelter system, peer support. And I noticed that it's much easier to avoid the sort of interactions in which you would say have to deal with the police or have to interface with the system in a different way when, for example, you have a small business idea that can sort of, if it gets going, not all businesses will survive, but with enough people, whether it's a group of youth or individual, if they have the resources to sort of push their ideas forward, it's really a go. So they essentially present their ideas and, to a committee, somewhat similar to this. And if the idea seems feasible and seems like it can go a longer way, they're given funding. Now, afterwards, the one issue is afterwards they don't exactly do much follow-up, but in and of itself, it's one of those ways where, you know, it kind of addresses some of the, it addresses a few issues. A, it diverts youth attention away from anything negative. B, it boosts confidence in the sense that, you know, assisting them to sort of develop these ideas and tweaking as necessary, and even straight up saying, you know, this idea doesn't exactly work and it shall not work, but if you tweak it a little bit, it may actually work. It helps youth in neighborhoods where there's no opportunity or they perceive to have little opportunity. It kind of helps them to envision something greater than whether it's the streets or whatever it may be. And also, if we're to be honest, not everybody is guaranteed to, or even has the interest to go to, say, college or university. So alternative avenues, and especially now with the pandemic, things are now forced to be online. And there's a wide, I won't list them all, but we understand there's a wide range and a wide variety of online businesses that could be started for little cost, almost virtually no cost, I guess, at this point. So, and our society is kind of set up where the average person, even if they're, you know, poor, quote unquote, have a smartphone. So I'm very interested in how, I know social media, it almost ties into that topic where social media is, Mr. King was saying, there's the idea that it's a revolutionary, but maybe it doesn't pan out like that in reality. You know, I think especially with these, you know, younger Gen Z coming out of these communities, our world is really fixated on these sorts of interactions here. So any business that is online based and, you know, with the right assistance, right guidance, and the right funding, the right resources, I think we're entering a phase where it's a really ripe time, like none other time before, to gear youth who are not necessarily college bound or the traditional route of whether it's trades or whatever, to sort of, you know, as I was saying before, just develop an alternative path. So
Kwesi, am I understanding you correctly that this kind of ties in with what Geoff and Nick mentioned and Mr. King mentioned about social media, and I know you're not saying it needs to be social media, but creating some sort of funding to help those youths who can become more creative and find a different way of utilizing their creativity in a functional way to help the community to grow, so that they're not distracted with those things that might get them in trouble, if I'm understanding what you're saying.
That's exactly it. It's a very succinct way of putting it, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Oh.
So a smart way of addressing current problems with youth is to create some means to help them.
Yes.
Because not everybody's going to be that athlete. Not everyone is going to go to college, but that doesn't mean that they can't find a creative way of becoming innovative and earning an income, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so Nick wanted to say something, and then Mr. King. So Nick, go
Hi
ahead.
there, can you hear me? Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So just to piggyback off of what Kwesi was saying, so memory triggers. So growing up, we didn't talk about financial literacy in my household. That was actually one of those areas where you'd want to steer clear of. And that can be a detriment to anyone growing up if they don't understand things like the importance of financial literacy. So to expand that, for example, we're speaking on a platform that is the Ashton Dixon Youth Empowerment Foundation. The operative word here being youth to make my point. So if we can get the funding so that we can provide youth with resources, ideally at no cost to them, treat it like an investment, right? Pay now and return on investment later. Then we can teach them skills like the importance of financial literacy. So that can ultimately steer them away from making poor decisions from, at the end of the day, we don't know what we don't know, right? So if we can coach them up in that realm, that on its own would be a huge asset. And then more information on trade school, trade opportunities. It's not just you go to university or you get a scholarship or you make it big on whatever. There are many options under the sun. And then we can help to do, I guess would be like vocational assessments of the youth, right? Ask them, what is it that you are passionate about right now? Right. And I know they do this in schools to a certain extent, and kind of reverse engineer it. Be like, okay, well, if you enjoy doing this kind of thing, this is the career path that it might take you on. Let's work backwards now and start to set you up for success moving forward. But you know what? Sorry. By the way, shout out to this foundation again with the tutoring initiative. That's fantastic because you want educated, informed youth. So also how to apply to post-secondary education institutions, be it here in Canada or abroad. Right? We want to make sure that they have those kind of resources that allow them to do those kinds of things. Again, I'm aware that these things exist to a certain extent, but I think that we're missing that demographic of youth that don't know or might have some kind of perceived, there might be a stigma behind the resource centers that are available to them, maybe something that is advertised as a safe space to them, something that looks familiar. These are people within my community that are trying to help me out, and I hate saying this out loud, but it does help when people that look like you are extending a helping hand, right? I think of my experiences growing up. I had a very jaded opinion of law enforcement growing up because I was constantly being harassed by law enforcement, and none of those individuals looked like me until one day when essentially was being framed. The arresting officer did his due diligence and dropped all the charges ahead of me having a court date because he listened to me, he did his job properly, and he realized that I was not criminally responsible for anything that had transpired. That officer looked like me, and that made me start to look at police in a different light. So bringing it back to this point, resource centers with people in the community that resemble the people that need these resources, and then entrepreneurial researches, teaching them research methods. That ties back into the whole social media discussion that we're having. The broader overarching point is we got to know what kind of information we're being fed with and be able to sift through what's real and what's not. And so just understanding how to critically analyze the information that's in front of you is so important. I can't understate that because sometimes, when I have people in my circles that will send out Facebook posts or Instagram posts or whatever saying this and this is happening, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. And what I do is I will read that article and then I'll try to find out what media outlet has distributed that and then what conglomerate is responsible for essentially creating that media outlet, right? And then from there, I can do research on that big umbrella corporation and find out what are your political affiliations, what is your mission statement, your vision, what is it that you're trying to actually do, and then that's going to allow me to establish credibility with those sources. And at the end of the day, too, fun. Youth need to be youth, right? They need to be able to relax. They can't always be serious. having to deal with the realities of the world that's going on. They need a place to escape and just be able to relax, unwind, and just do things like play ping pong or chess
So,
or whatever it is.
so Nick, from what I understand, what you're saying is creating a space where, to add to what Kwesi is saying, it's not just about learning and creating innovation, but it's a space where, not a community center, but a space where youth can realize that there are those that are around them that are of the same reflection. I don't want to say color because it's not just about the color, but culture, even though color is a part of culture, sort of. But just having someone that they can relate to as well as have fun with, having fun things to do.
Yeah, and there can be diversity within those groups, right?
Okay, yeah,
It shouldn't be homogenous. I
right.
want to make that clear.
Yeah,
But you know,
I got you.
if one of those community or one of those volunteers or whatever it is, if they're paid staff, if you know they're of Hispanic descent, if they're of First Nations descent, Black, so on and so forth, everything under the rainbow, right? That could help.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah, we want to make these.
Not to cut you, but I know that Mr. King was going to say something, and Donna also is going to be adding to this.
Yeah, that
And I
just,
know we're actually at 9 o'clock, so we're supposed to be ending. I know we started right on time almost.
Okay,
And this is a very rich conversation. So go ahead, DonnaDickson. You got the floor. You're the boss.
sorry, I just have one little thing to say towards what Nick just said, and then I'll let you speak. But Leo made a very good point in his comment. We're not going to draw kids in to talk about financial literacy, but we can get them in to talk when they're learning, like when they're playing basketball or football. That's how you're going to be able to get them to talk and teach them about financial literacy. I just wanted to make that point because you did make that point. And I think that is
doesn't see color. Sports don't see color.
And
sports does not see color. This is the truth.
And sports don't see color. So this is a good way to teach them. So Leo, after Rawlson, if you wanted to add more to that, I'll let you be able to speak.
Where's Lee?
I just
Go
wanted,
ahead, Rawlson.
yeah, I just wanted to interject just really briefly and say that because I know that people are talking about entrepreneurial opportunities, and you know, the federal government had just announced that it was committing $93 million to entrepreneurs, and they can start to apply now. So the National Ecosystem Fund is accepting applications until December 21st. And the idea is to really have a broader Black entrepreneurship program, first in its first type of program like this in Canada's history, to really provide some resources to business owners who have traditionally had you know, real challenges accessing capital, real challenges accessing resources such as training. So you know, there has been some movement, and I just want people to know that there are resources out there, and I am just adding that to the chat. And that's all I really wanted to say. But you know, these are real resources. I hope that as many Black businesses attempt to apply for it as possible. These are funding opportunities, mentorship opportunities, financial planning, which is what you're talking about, and business training. So it's not just here are some dollars. It's also the suite of tools that are necessary to make a business successful.
All right, we've got a ton of comments rolling.
Jackie, can you
Yes.
Leo wanted to say something? Oh, Jeff, did you want to say something too?
No,
I'm okay. I'm okay.
Okay, I think Leo had something he wanted to go a little bit more into that finance with basketball and football?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that. I mean, this is where, I mean, what Chief Sloly said, and Tim Tierney and Rawlson are talking about. I mean, the city has a huge role that it could play in terms of, cultural community infrastructure. And there is a shameful, story in the city of Ottawa. If you go and look at, what we build in Minto, Barrhaven, or Goulburn, compared to what we provide in Ledbury or Herongate, and this is where Ralston, I would disagree with you that there's no gerrymandering in this city. When we build out on new cornfields further and further and further out, we are sucking resources away from those communities like Lower Town and like Herongate, where the infrastructure is just fallen apart. And as we go out and we go out, we create more of a certain class of voter, and we take a lot of resources that doesn't go to Caldwell, doesn't go to Ritchie Street, doesn't go to places where it could have tremendous impact. So that's the gerrymandering that really does happen. And so it makes me appalled when I see a guy like Scott Moffat, creating a platform around renaming Goulburn. Yeah, symbolically important, but do something that actually makes a difference. Like, the systemic racism in the city is how we fund development, how we take taxes and resources from one area and we transfer it out to another area. But, I'm optimistic that change can happen, and, great that we can have discussions like this. But as I say, some of the leadership and the players have got to come together. At the city level, organizations like the Catholic School Board, the times I have tried to get in a meeting, Immaculata, you can deal with a principal, but I can more easily get a meeting with Justin Trudeau, Don and I had one, than I can get a meeting with an executive from the Catholic School Board in Ottawa to have a discussion about how we might coordinate effort. So anyway, but this is a really good start. So well done, I'm optimistic.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo.
I think Ralston wants to talk. Yeah, let him go.
To respond to what Leo
Go
was.
ahead, Mr. King.
And, there is a structural issue. Whether I would call that gerrymandering, I would personally say that there is a challenge around the development charge framework, so the municipal financing framework that we have. So when I'm thinking about gerrymandering, I'm thinking about somebody, if we're talking about the US context, we're talking about really utilizing the legal system or the political system to remove people from the polls as something that is premeditated. These are structural issues, and you're absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why when we had the urban boundary debate, I voted against expansion. The challenge with development charges is that they take place where the expansion is happening, where growth is happening. And so the challenge is we get all these new dollars in these new communities because all the development charges from the construction is going into that infrastructure, whereas we have aged infrastructure within the inner core that has to be funded through renewal dollars. And of course, those are less than the growth dollars. So I would agree with you that there's a structural challenge. We have identified that, and we want to work with the province, but it actually requires changes from the province to see those changes. But I'm with you there. I think we have a slight different interpretation. When I was talking about gerrymandering, I'm thinking about in the Trump kind of era and states saying that we will literally redraw maps to ensure that we cut out people in a systematic way. I don't think that happens in Canada in the same type of way that happens in the United States. Not that we don't have problems here with that. and not that we don't have structural problems. And I think that those are things that need to be addressed, because you're absolutely right. Where are the racialized people living? Where are the Black people living? Where are the Indigenous people living in the urban core that actually requires renewal? And I have a lot of, being in the inner core. I don't have that great development rate. We don't have the intensification rate that people complain about intensification, but we don't have it at a rate that would allow us to fill the coffers in Ward 13 to actually make the massive investments in recreational facilities. So as a council, and especially the urban councillors, we have identified that as a massive issue. All of our resources were built at the Centennial around 1967. They're falling apart, and we need to have that investment. So I agree with you there, and I'm sorry about the nuance. I didn't want to seem like I'm not aware of some of the political challenges, but there is a structural challenge that we need to address here.
All right. Thank you, Rawlson. Now, this has been such an active discussion. We've had a broad span, and I hate to say we've got to bring it to a close, but I'm gonna ask the leader, DonnaDickson, ADYE's founder, president, my beautiful sister, to just come and say those last closing words. I feel as though we can continue this discussion, because it sounds as though we have a few key topics that keep coming back that really can address this thing called systemic racism, this thing called growth, innovation for the young people, addressing cyberbullying or the misuse of social media, the development of areas that need to be developed, not just a physical development, Ward 13, there's challenges there that Mr. King has mentioned that need to be addressed. And it has a large pool of visible minorities that live there. I mean, the pockets are throughout the city. So DonnaDickson, I am going to stop talking because I can keep on talking. We all know this. Just so you don't know, if you don't know and you can't tell, I do know how to talk. I am a communication major for a reason. I didn't just do my undergrad in it. I did my master's in it as well. So Donna, go ahead.
We're going to have to come to a close tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. King for being here. Really appreciated the info and the input. We will be doing a part 3 because it seems we do have a lot more to discuss. Hopefully, I'm inviting you from now. So hopefully you'll be able to join us again. And yes, thanks everyone. Keep tuned, and we'll be having a part 3 to continue.
And please make sure you complete that survey that we have sent out. We're just asking that you put your email address. It does not have to be a Google email address. And including the panelists, we're asking you to do it as well. All right. Thank you all for joining us. I appreciate everybody's feedback, and I wish I could speak to everyone with all that was said. There's so much rich information. We've got to start tracking our conversations and putting some things down, utilizing that grant that Mr. King has told us about. And Mr. Mr. King, if you could even, I don't know if they do this in Ottawa, when they say that there's a grant, do they actually give a session where they can give pointers as to the ways to develop the applications?
It's a federal grant. Usually you fill out a written application. It was just announced yesterday that the application periods are open. You know, there had been a lot of talk by Black federal politicians, so politicians who sit in our federal government, about the creation of more job training programs and more financing to Black business. You have to appreciate, as a municipal government, we actually do not engage in those types of direct loans. Our services are different, as well as our resources. They're much more smaller, but our federal government, unlike in the United States, provides these loans. This is the first type of program like this ever for Black entrepreneurs. And since we have people talking about innovation and youth, and in ensuring that youth are able to build small businesses and businesses on their own, I wanted them to know that there are resources so that they don't have to do it alone. So that there is the training, there are the mentorship opportunities, along with the potential of dollars to really assist those new businesses. So first of its kind ever in Canada, specifically for the Black community, for Black entrepreneurs. Please get the word out. You know, my federal cousin, Greg Fergus, did a lot of hard work to get these types of programs in place, or a Black MP who sits in the Outaouais area, so on the Quebec side, but he was doing a lot of work with his colleagues to ensure that we have these types of programs. So it's important that we take advantage of them.
Now, is there a link that people could go to see it? Or
Yeah,
do
so
they just go straight to the federal website?
I put it in the chat. So I think that people can go to that link, and that's where the information is about the application.
All right, so everyone knows to go and look in that chat. Thank you all for joining us. We will be closing out, so check the chat and copy the link and save it. And ADYE will also try and post it as well. All right, you all have a good evening. God bless, and thank you again for joining us. Bye.
Bye.
Excellent. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just waiting so that everyone can copy the link before I close out.
Did Donna leave the room?
No, yes, she did.
She did? Okay.
Yes.
I'll give her a call. Basically, I spent the tail end of the discussion reading up on the Black Entrepreneurship Ecosystem Fund, and we essentially have a month. I think ADYE absolutely qualifies. So
Good.
I want to see if we can get a closed discussion or just a call going on and figuring out what
Did you
resources we
copy the
have.
link?
Oh,
Did you copy?
I'm on the site right now.
Same
Yeah,
here. Okay.
Yeah, I've
All
been
right.
reading through it. Yeah.
I agree with you. So hopefully we'll be able to do that. Because I've got the link now, I will be closing the room. So everyone have a good evening.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.